Welcome to Collective Conversations. I'm your host, Mike Brewer, and today we are speaking with Austin Lowe, the founder and CEO of Peak. Austin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike, for having me.
Excellent. I'm very excited about our conversation today, but before we dive in, I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Peak.
Sure. My name is Austin Lowe. I am founder and CEO of Peak, and we create a software platform to unlock the e-commerce experience for leasing. And I know that that's call it jargon-loaded term, but really our core mission as a company is that finding an apartment and the prospect journey should be as easy as Amazon Subscribe and Save, as buying anything online. And really that comes down to building a trustworthy online process where a prospect can get all of the information that they need, and really come to a decision about whether or not they want to live in the community, without having to show up in person or at most show up to the property as really a confirmatory step, as opposed to kind of the old buy it in store sales model where you see something online and then you have to go to the store, check it out, and actually kind of figure it out while you're there to see whether or not you want to go through with the purchase.
As an introvert, you are singing my song. I want to do everything online right up to picking up my digital access code on my cell phone, walking right into the apartment without seeing anyone.
Exactly. And really that's where we're seeing the prospect and consumer demand go. Really the pandemic has told us or really educated consumers that was possible.
That's
and
right.
The interesting thing is that what it forced was the usage of virtual tours as the entire really kind of leasing experience, as opposed to just a marketing tool. For the 10 years before we started, and we don't pretend to be the first company to do anything with virtual tours, they were used as marketing tools. You put them on your website, you said, hey, this is going to increase my website engagement, this is going to increase the number of leads that I get, and it just kind of stopped there, because you could create one or two virtual tours because they were expensive to make, they were hard to make. You, in many cases, had to hire a professional photographer. And when it's that expensive and not really scalable, you just say, all right, well, I'll show a model unit, I'll show the lobby, and click the contact button and show up to the property and shop in person. But what we're moving to, and what the consumer preference has moved to, is, hey, show me the actual unit. Apartments.com made their whole listing of the future push to say, hey, this is what shopping for an apartment should be. And really the crux of it was, hey, everything else that you buy online, you should be able to see an accurate representation of the thing you're about to sign the dotted line for.
That's right.
And with Peak, what we've done is we've created such a scalable and easy way to virtualize space that for the first time it's actually possible. You could virtualize an entire building. Our customers, even a 700 unit lease up. This is one of our recent customers who just signed on 700 unit lease up, said, hey, virtualize everything. Virtualize my hallways. I want the prospect to be able to walk from the lobby into the elevator, through the hallway, to the door of their future apartment. And that's the future. That's e-commerce for leasing. That's an online shopping experience.
That's right. That's right. It comes to mind for me. Actually, I'm going to write that down as a note because I want to back up just a second. My imagination, well, let me phrase it this way. Every entrepreneur who is out there scratching their own itch in terms of trying to solve a problem that I believe your story is, you had a problem, you're scratching your own itch in terms of creating a solution. So you had this eureka moment. Can you kind of tell us how that eureka moment came to be and how you scratched your own itch in creating Peak.
So I would say it was a cascade of many eureka moments. So as I mentioned when we first chat before this, like I didn't start in the real estate industry. I was an investor in e-commerce companies. I was investing in companies that sold everything online, um, all the way up to a mattress that you would keep for 8 years. But at the same time, I was a young resident of New York City who happened to be very picky about apartments. So this is actually apartment number 10. This is the first one that I've actually extended a lease.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So there was this dissonance where I was in this job that I basically couldn't get away from my desk. I was working 12 to 16-hour days and investing in companies that made it easy for you to buy anything online. Yet when my lease was up, I had to go see places in person. I had to beg a member of my team, hey, like, cover for me, rearrange my meetings, like make sure that I was seeing apartments after the market closed. And it was the weirdest disconnect, but it didn't really kind of fully gel into a eureka moment until I decided to leave the investing industry. That's a podcast in itself. Uh, but I went on a year and a half long sabbatical, just doing photography and playing with cameras, and started playing around with essentially like what was on the cutting edge of 360 degree and virtual tour and kind of reality capture hardware. Um, and then at the same time, a Columbia classmate of mine who ran a real estate brokerage was like, "Hey, like I think the future of brokerage is software. Like I don't know if we're going to be doing all this in an office and going out to places on our own." And I was like, "Wait, hold on. Like just putting the dots together. Like
Yeah.
virtual reality or essentially like 3D representations of space or interactive 3D experiences are the key to unlocking e-commerce and me not having to go from apartment to apartment to apartment. And our North Star was always let's create a better way to find home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the funny thing is like we started with VR headsets. Went through a whole thing with like consumer adoption and being like, okay, like could we get consumers to pick out a couple apartments online and then we ship them a VR headset and then obviously that didn't work and then like wait, hold on. We can all we have to do is create a very scalable way to scan space, take care of the content management, get it onto the property manager's website, get it onto the ILSs. Because when you go from call it scanning one or two spaces in a building to 400,
Oh,
you can't have a spreadsheet of 400 URLs and expect one of your on-site leasing staff to always plug in the right URL into the right place in the CMS and do that in a timely fashion. So we said, okay, well, we need to automate the content management. We need to hook into the property management systems. Um, and then here we are today with really a platform that unlocks the e-commerce experience for prospects and really for the owners and operators enables centralizing the leasing office.
so in unlocking, and I want to get to centralizing the leasing office. That's a big topic today. I think around the industry, and but unlocking. So I have to imagine there are many components to unlocking the e-commerce ecosystem. You sort of had this epiphany moment after the VR headset thing, or at least the way I researched it. There was this epiphany moment that, hey, we need to unlock this e-commerce thing. Can you kind of talk about how that came to be in your head and then the key components that you had to put in place to actually make that happen?
Mhm. So we really just addressed it from solving the problems of our customers. Like the end state, being a lifelong renter was easy to imagine. Hey, if I want to go see a property, I should be able to have an interactive 3D experience that makes me feel like I'm actually there. Um, Getting to that end state was a series of problem solving. Like at first, we were like, well, if you can't create the content, if it takes you an hour to scan a one bedroom, you're never going to get the content in the first place. So that was called problem A that we solved. We said, okay, let's rebuild from the ground up our own technology to scan space 3 times faster. Our benchmark is a one bedroom apartment. You need to be able to get in and out and virtualize it in 15 minutes or less. And we got that. And we were able to do that. And then we're like, wait, this still isn't, this is not seeing this like that we thought was going to happen. And looking into it further, it was like, well, like, yeah, people like found it to be really useful, but it wasn't on the website. It wasn't on the ILSs. And when you just give somebody a bunch of URLs, it becomes really hard to manage, especially once you virtualize entire buildings. So we said, okay, we need to content manage. We need to make sure that availabilities are actually being sent out. So we had to connect to the property management systems. We had to integrate with the Funnels, Yardies, Real Pages, Entradas of the world, and be able to even in an interface say, hey, here are the available units in your building, and here are the virtual tours for them. So we got there, and then wait, hold on, like we still need to get a better implementation into the website because not every website vendor supported us. So we created what we call our magic buttons, which are one line of JavaScript that allows you to integrate into any website. So you can get unit level virtual tours without having to throw out your old website template, without having to redo everything. And we take care of it for you. We just say, hey, plug this into right next to where you have your GTM container, which pretty much every real estate website will support Google Tag Manager. And voila, you have unit level virtual tours that dynamically update to your availabilities. And then from basically like that formed what I would say is the core of what Peak is. But once the prospect moves online and shows up to the property less, the data that you get from prospects looking at your virtual tours, doing virtual walkthroughs of your property matter a lot more. So we rolled out what we call our prospect intelligence, which measures down to the prospect level, down to the room level, what people are looking at. So our customers now can pull up Mike Brewer and see that you have seen these 4 units in the building. You spend 70% of your time looking in the living room. And out of all the amenities, you have spent most of your time looking at the fitness center. So when you come to the property, they can personalize that engagement and increase the chances of converting you into a resident.
So like a leasing consultant would actually have access to this data prior to me walking in the front door, and they'd be able to take those data points and say, hey, I noticed when you toured online that you spent a lot of time in the fitness center. What were you looking for specifically? Love to tell you more about that.
Exactly. For something as simple as knowing whether or not they've cross-shopped your 1 bedrooms and your 2 bedrooms before going out. So Peak Prospect Intelligence was an outgrowth of this problem of, hey, all my prospects are moving online. I know less and less and less about the people showing up to the door, but I know that they're looking online. Can you tell me what they're looking at online? So our whole prospect intelligence and prospect level analytics module, which is, I believe, the only kind in the industry, allows leasing teams to do that.
I have to imagine down the road, there's several things running through my mind. Down the road, a developer could actually use this data to inform future development decisions, right? And what amenities that I do.
You're giving away our roadmap, Mike.
Well, yeah.
So
Okay.
at the end of the day, when you think about the Peak platform and what we can do, because we automate the content management, we can even automate the content creation now. Our newest offering, Autopilot, it automatically dispatches a photographer to your property when the unit is made ready and ready to be photographed, and it'll get scanned and then automatically uploaded, automatically sent up, like hooked into your website, all done. You don't even need to touch anything. But we have essentially the connection to the property management system. We know who's looking at what, and we know what the inside looks like. We know how big the rooms are. We know what finishes are in the room. So it does become a really fascinating and rich data set, especially when you're starting to get to our scale where we have millions of prospect sessions a year
Right.
that are being logged.
So is it a stretch to think that you could so somebody moves into a building, they're there, let's say 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 15 months, whatever. At the end of that sort of life cycle in the building that they're in, is it a stretch to think that because you have these data points, and if that person is now out in the market looking for an apartment again, you can start to sort of tie into a marketing angle where you're keeping these people sort of in an alumni program and kind of helping with the marketing side of the business and dripping to them ongoing.
It's certainly possible. I think there's a lot of work to be done until we get there. I think if you think about like, and we always think about this parallel, like Shopify. Um, if you are knitting wool caps and you want to sell them online, in the beginning, Shopify just said, "Hey, we'll spin up a website for you. We'll take care of your payments, and we'll give you a CMS to track your." And then, as an outgrowth of that, then they said, "Okay, all right, we will facilitate your third-party logistics." And then further out of that, they said, "Okay, we can help you automate your marketing." And then slowly and slowly around that, essentially, you can build a full ecosystem to facilitate that e-commerce transaction. So for us, like if you think about where we can cover now in the prospect journey, from the first time that the prospect sets eyes on your property digitally, they're in a Peak virtual tour. We can really get them down to the point that they've substantially made their decision. Like if you look at the tour to conversion rates or the changes in the tour to conversion rates after a property integrates Peak. Basically, by the time somebody shows up to the property after looking at a unit level virtual tour, it's a better than 50-50 shot that they'll look up the rest. So we still have a little bit to go until we can hit checkout and turn that prospect into a resident and essentially give you something that's, call it a semi-autonomous leasing office.
Yeah, yeah.
You can still have people on top to engage, and that type of personalization and that type of human engagement will always have an impact, particularly in certain subsegments of the market. But at the base level, we want to be able to turn a prospect into a resident in one unified software chain. So one thing that we've actually started piloting and are going to be launching soon is our self-guided touring offering. So a companion offering to our virtual tour stack, which essentially allows this prospect who's already walked through the property virtually to go through a quick, lightweight, self-guided tour process. So take care of the scheduling, take care of the ID verification, take care of the access control, and bring them closer to that, hey, I'm ready to sign on the dotted line. But once we get there, yeah, okay, can we start remarketing? Can we start thinking about the life cycle of a resident? 100%.
That is so very cool. It brought to mind as you were sort of navigating through that it at some point it becomes sort of platform agnostic as well, in the sense that if if I'm a TikTok influencer, if I'm a Instagram influencer, if I use any one of these platforms, right? If I if I use one of those platforms to highlight one's opportunity to do a virtual tour, I can sort of embed that link in that process, and then the e-commerce can actually happen, provided Instagram, TikTok, and others. Is that right to think that way? You can do that actual commerce right there in that platform at some point.
So in theory, I mean, in theory today, you can if you create a link in Instagram to a specifically like a specific unit that is scanned on Peak, that we have the details for your online application, you can in that one little window go from a call it top of funnel marketing channel to stepping through the virtual tour to clicking apply now within the virtual tour and then straight into the application and done without ever talking to a single person.
That is phenomenal.
We're like our goal really is to give that ability, give that superpower to any property manager, any owner to deliver this magical experience that finding an apartment and signing a lease should be as easy as buying a bottle of vitamins off of Amazon.
It's I 100% agree with that, Stephen. And I've often thought, and I'm sure this is not my novel thought. I do a lot of reading, so this probably came from somewhere. I just won't be able to make attribution to it, but it it should. So if I show up to buy something on Amazon, I can either buy swiftly, that little sideways buy or whatever. Buy now, I think I forget what it's called, but my imagination tells me, as easy as that is on the front side, on the back side, there are like 2 million moving pieces as it relates to the code that is necessary and the engineering that is necessary to make that one click shopping experience come to life. That's safe to say on your side of the business. It's a lot.
Well, you have to scan the space. You have to give the consumer that kind of what you see is what you get experience. And obviously the code on the backside of running all that is quite a bit. The analytics that run on top of it to be able to give you the insights to say, hey, your blue floor plan is the best performing floor plan in your marketing this month. So obviously the analytics behind that also is quite a bit. But at the end of the day, it's you have a space, you have Peak as a platform, and we're able to facilitate a significant amount of call it what used to be a show up to the leasing office, have a person physically walk you around and say, "Oh, do you like this? Do you like this?" So we're getting there. We're getting to that point that it can be a one click order.
Do you see? I'm presupposing with your current client base, you're seeing some trends within those organizations, and to the extent that you're comfortable speaking about it, trends in the way of, like we just touched on, uh, leasing becoming a centralized function or activity in an organization. Are you seeing that sort of as a big movement in the industry from your perspective?
100%. I mean, a lot of our clients are really using Peak to facilitate that. At the end of the day, when you do transition to call it a virtual first prospect journey, not that much leasing needs to happen on site. The on-site teams and there are other kind of areas in terms of tenant experience, resident engagement, where it's becoming more and more important to have people to do those things. Um,
Yeah,
but you said it yourself. You're happy sitting at home and just browsing away.
that's right.
And if it's going to be something that enables a smoother process for everyone. If it's going to be this win-win, why not do it? And particularly when you're seeing an environment where on-site team turnover is extraordinarily high, labor costs are continuing to rise. We're in an inflationary environment that puts pressure on NOIs. Centralized leasing becomes something that is extraordinarily attractive. And when you think about kind of where it is in the maximal state, like when you think about an e-commerce retailer, they still have support staff. They still have people to help you facilitate the sale, but they're centralized. They're all sitting in one place, and that's really where the industry leaders are going. And what they found is that doing it without virtual first, doing it without giving that e-commerce experience to the prospect is really difficult, because then, like, if let some some managers are or have tried the kind of self-guided only approach, where they're like, okay, all right, like we're just gonna do centralized leasing, have everybody have any lead go through, do a self-guided tour. And then you end up with 5 people who get lost in the building every single day. And you end up with residents scratching their heads saying, like, why am I seeing 20 strangers walk through my hallway?
That's right.
So as people have experimented with centralized leasing and started to develop it or form it, I think what you're seeing is that a lot of the largest players in the industry are moving towards is to use a virtual first kind of platform such as Peak to make centralized leasing possible.
I'm interested to know, and I hope I can articulate this in the right way. So, so there are a lot of people in the world today that have sort of grown up digital, right? Digital denizens. They've just that's all they know, right? They were born with a laptop or an iPad in their hands or an iPhone in their hands. But so my imagination tells me that part of this push or shift in our industry is being driven by that consumer expecting and demanding that type of experience. But then you have this whole other swath of the world that is not, they didn't grow up that way. You could put me in that group, even though I love technology and I'll be one of the first to adopt and adapt. Um, as far as you, when you put your technology into an ecosystem, is the adoption sort of near immediate and 100%, or do people sort of shift over time into going through that experience? I hope that makes sense.
I
Is it
think
uptake?
as soon as it's on the website, as soon as it's plugged in, as soon as Peak is set up, as soon as it's on the ILSs, everybody goes to it.
It's just
Um,
intuitive and natural.
it's, I mean, at the end of the day, it's, would you like to see the unit sitting from your couch, or would you like to get in the car, drive 45 minutes round trip to across town?
In
Uh,
Atlanta traffic,
yeah, or even, and really, like, when we think about where this has impact, like, for anybody earning an hourly wage, not having to take time off work, because leasing offices typically aren't open after hours. You typically have limited hours on the weekend. So this becomes a massive time saving tool for the prospects also, and a significant service to anybody who doesn't want to or isn't able to take time out of their day.
and I have to imagine, in full disclaimer here, we're not a peak customer, and I know you're going to say yet, but, but I have to imagine that a sales associate or a leasing consultant, whatever they're called in your business, they are probably quite likely very happy to have a customer that walks in the door that is fully educated and ready to just, hey, I just need to take a real life look at that fitness center, a real life look at that hallway, a real life look at the parking garage, but I'm ready otherwise. Can we just go? It takes a lot of the effort, the sales effort, out of the equation.
Yep. It well, generally it's not even a last look. It's like, hey, like, do the carpet smell?
That's fair.
But at the end of the day, it's a lot less walking around or having to kind of entertain a prospect. And then I've been this prospect who is kind of out of politeness pretending to be interested. Um, after like after the first look, like 30 seconds later, oh no, this isn't for me. But oh man, I've made this appointment. I've already taken the slice out of this person's time, and you're just there out of politeness. But yeah, in terms of the tour to lease conversion rates, it's a significant lift, and it really allows leasing teams to and on-site teams who may not have just leasing as their only responsibility to focus really on the things that people are good at. Engaging residents, solving problems. Like think about like when you want to talk to a person. If you buy something online, like when was the last time you said, "Hey, like I want to talk to somebody before I buy this"? But think about the last time you had like a travel delay or had a problem with an order. That's when you want to talk to someone.
That's right.
When problems come up in the support role, in the engagement role, that's when people value that human connection. So by essentially reducing the workload of the pre-lease process, we really free up on-site teams to do what people want them to do and to do what they're good at.
That is so right. It's I had a I'll call him a friend today. I think his classic title would be an engineer, or not title, but he probably frame his role in the world that way. He said we really should offer people the opportunity to get really pointy about their effort in the world or the toil that they do. To your point about getting really hyper focused on the thing you're very, very good at, because it probably enriches your life as much as it enriches the other person's life. And this is giving us an opportunity to do that. I want to put the car in reverse for a second because I meant to ask you a question, let's say 15 minutes back. So it's not going to fit in
I
the flow
talked
of
too much. So yeah.
no, no,
Let's
no. I went right past it. I'm um, so in my head, let's call this virtual reality or virtual touring, whatever we want to label that. In my head, augmented reality could become a thing in that VR, or I know it's not VR traditionally, but in that virtual tour experience, you could have an augmented reality experience such that if I'm walking around in the living room, I can do furniture placement, or I can, as long as those things sort of, who knows, I'm not a tech person, I don't know how those things, but could you actually marry an augmented reality scenario into that virtual tour option?
so to be a purist about the term, uh,
Thank you.
we in terms of augmented reality, in terms of having something that you are actually call it augmenting your present physical reality. I think that that's a bit of a different case. But in terms of augmenting the represented reality inside of this virtual, um, we already do that. We actually allow we allow a property owner or manager to insert virtual furniture that you can toggle on and off right within virtual tour. Some managers have even used that to show alternative layouts. Like, what would this room or what would this one bedroom look like if you flexed it into a two bedroom with a temporary wall? Um, one of our one of our partners in New York City had a really tough time moving a kind of atypical studio layout. But after staging in a temporary wall and showing that, hey, look, this is a livable space that you can convert to a one bedroom. Um, Originally, it was just art, but then they actually had prospects inquire at the property. Hey, well, I signed the lease. Like, I remember seeing this in the tour. Like, can I buy the wall?
That's awesome.
So we already do that to some extent, and we allow owners and managers to flag certain features of the property, so that you can superimpose additional information. Um, but yeah, we're certainly moving that way where this kind of represented reality includes additional details about the space. And it includes, again, like the goal is like everything you need to know or everything that you would want to know about this apartment or this community should be able to be available to you virtually so that you are ready to click apply now without ever having to show up to the property.
That makes sense. I so that brought to mind, is it fair to think about what you're doing in terms of scanning the entire building, units, hallways, et cetera, as creating a digital twin of the property, or is that a whole different concept?
That is a fun term popularized by Matterport and Microsoft. Essentially, yeah, it is a digital twin of the property. I think when everybody's going to define the jargon slightly differently, but at the end of the day, yes, this is a virtual representation. Like, I want to give you the feeling of what it's like to live in this community. I want to give you the feeling of what it would be like to physically walk through this space, in as convenient and accessible as a medium as possible.
Does this, and the reason I asked that question is sort of a lead into you. Do you there are times where entrepreneurs create um, a solution to a problem, and then that solution ends up being like a secondary. It has a secondary or a tertiary third case use, right, or use case rather. Do you see this? I imagine that there are offshoots of this where it can become useful in other ways that don't have to do with the consumer coming in and doing commerce. It could handle, it could, yeah, key up.
We're starting to we're starting to kind of gather some interest and explore the possibility of piloting this in a maintenance context,
Yeah.
particularly when it comes to risk, when it comes to security deposits, because we have already one set of imagery from before you moved in. We just need the after. And the differential between that should tell us a lot about the condition of the apartment. So theoretically, using slightly more data than we have today, um, we could tell you, hey, unit 2203 needs to be repainted, or there's a big stain in the carpet, or the counter's chipped. Um, and there is extended use for this spatial data beyond just the leasing transaction.
Oh
Um,
man, you could actually, not to cut you off. So
yeah.
there's this post condition where you have a vendor set that would come in and do this work. You could actually use this virtual link experience, like virtual tour experience, send that over to the painter. Hey, look, I need you to paint this wall. Here's exactly what it looks like and exactly where you need to paint it. And you
Yep.
could do a transaction through that.
There,
through that.
there's a lot of applications to being able to scan space very, very, very quickly. And I put that as like the conditional, because if it takes too long to create this model, which most kind of most tools out there, at least for call it residential, it's not scalable. You can't do it across the entire building. Um, but we're reaching a point in machine learning and computer vision such that you can actually compress the data capture into a scalable process. And as we get there, and as we continue to evolve in this arena, more and more opportunities will open up for the usage of our data. I mean, like literally 6, 7 years ago, when I first was doing research into computer vision companies as an investor, it was long held that, hey, like you would not be able to do self-driving and depth estimation without binocular cameras, two cameras pointing in the same direction. Now we're like, hey, like just give me one image and I can tell you exactly how big the room is. And I can, or even one image, and I can create a 3D model of a physical object sitting on your desk. So as we continue to kind of mature machine learning and computer vision, a lot of really exciting things are going to open up for the data set that we have. But again, the key is like if you only have a model unit and your lobby virtualized, there isn't much you could do about that. But if you have every single availability scanned, if you have been scanning every single unit as they turn, you have this incredible data set that you can build a ton of different use cases off of going into the future.
So that it seems like a nice segue for you just it's not just, but I'm gonna use the word just. You just closed a seed round with GFA.
Yep.
Uh, and my imagination tells me there's a roadmap attached to that. And to the extent you're comfortable talking about what is to come for Peak specifically, and I know Optic's coming up next week, so you may not be able to talk about that. Well, actually, when we post, you'll be there.
Yep. Yeah. This will be hitting the airwaves right during
That's
Optech.
right. It won't go out before then, so
So for us, like I think if you look in the near term and you look at just the opportunity set on leasing alone, and we've always kind of structured our business in a this is what we're focusing on, or these are the things we're focusing on, and then we're always going to take some call it asymmetric other bets,
understood.
little wildcard uses, things like saying, hey, like can we estimate the condition of a property using our imagery. But if we think about the core roadmap, what we've developed are really the rails to enable e-commerce leasing for any property manager. And that alone is incredibly deep if you think about how much or how many resources are dedicated towards the simple act of leasing. You
Huge.
have not like the software spend right now is like this. And then you have the people, you have the real estate of the leasing office itself, and you have a significant chunk of value that's currently being dedicated towards leasing when it doesn't have to be. And that's just in the enterprise segment of the market. That's not half of the rental housing stock in the United States. And we continually get small property owners who are looking to ask us, hey, we see this at this big 300 unit building. Like, could we use it? So we're actually starting to pilot essentially leasing as a service for really, really small owners. So nobody, the buildings that you would never want to touch as Radco, buildings that you would never want to touch as Cushman and Wakefield, because it just doesn't make sense. And that the owner is happy to do their property maintenance, the owner is happy to take care of everything else. They just don't want to deal with opening the door 17 times and coordinating scheduling with a bunch of people that are emailing and calling their personal cell phone. So we're setting up pilots, and we're still kind of building our wait list, and we're going to be piloting this in both New York and California. It's just so where it happens that we have people and real estate licenses. um, Fun fact, yeah, I'm actually a licensed real estate salesperson in the state of New York, and then we have another member of our team who's a licensed broker in California. Um, but we're going to be looking at ways to deliver this e-commerce leasing experience to the entire rental housing stock, not just the highly sophisticated companies that can do it for a 100, 200, 300 unit building. I'm of the firm belief that you should never compete with your customers, and I don't think we are equipped to. And it doesn't make sense for us to do leasing for a 300 unit building, because at that scale, you have things like, or you're, it makes sense to have a community manager. It makes sense to have the infrastructure for in person operations, but for my uncle's duplex, no, he just wants a good tenant, and he doesn't want to have to deal with marketing the unit, taking photos of the unit, talking to prospective residents, walking them through the property. And really, with the launch of our upcoming self-guided touring product, we have this complete solution that allows us to do this at a very reasonable price for small property owners.
I love that. I love that. It's always the little guy. Having owned property myself in the past, small single family homes and in duplexes, uh, I 100% understand and would be sign me up. Right? It's all that stuff I did not want to do when I owned them.
Exactly. It's like having a handyman on call to fix a leak once in a while. That's not crazy. And even like you have companies like Super now who will do it for whatever, $70 a month. But it's not 6 to 9% of gross rent a year.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Well, let me do this. We're coming up on 50 minutes. Is there anything that we missed here in this conversation today that you'd like to share with our audience or open up?
I'm picking my brain. We really went A to Z. We went from past, present to future of peak. Um, I'd say really, like, to anybody listening, like, when we think about the future of leasing, and thinking about software and thinking about tools, like, I, there's a lot of noise. There are like 50 million different software products that all use the same jargon to say, "Oh yeah, we're going to digitize the leasing journey. We're going to streamline this, streamline that." Um, and really, like, I think our product team has this kind of core question that we ask, and I think it would be applicable as we think about, or as the multifamily industry rethinks how leasing is done. Um, if you asked a stable master in 1900 how to go 100 miles an hour, he would probably tell you to build a mechanical horse, to build an analog of exactly what you've been doing, but just make it mechanical, make it automated. But that's not how we go 100 miles an hour today. You get in a car, it doesn't look anything like a horse. The only thing horse about a car is that we still measure the power output in horsepower. So, as we think of reinventing how people find home, it's not necessarily kind of critical to replicate everything that we've been doing in the past. And that the future state may look like a car and not a mechanical horse. So, like internally, when we come up with how do we create a better way to find home, how do we make this easier, faster, more accessible, more equitable for prospects and property owners, we're always like, okay, are we building a mechanical horse or are we designing the car? So I think we're at that turning point. We're at that turning point where you're starting to see these shifts. You're starting to see a push towards centralization. You're starting to see property owners and managers queue into a virtual first prospect experience. So I think that's like for us, that's one thing that we hold dear. But I think is always a question worth asking.
I love that. I As we draw to a complete close here, I want to give you the opportunity to tell people where they can learn. Certainly, learn more about Peak, but certainly, if offered the opportunity to get directly in touch with you or your team.
Definitely. We this is going to come out during OpTech. We are at OpTech. We are at booth K13. Location, location, location. The startup kiosks tend to be in the best place on the floor, so we love to grab them whenever, or we will continue to grab them as long as OpTech allows us to. And then our website, www.peak.us, or get directly in touch. Happy to chat, happy to talk about Peak, happy to learn about your problems as an owner or an operator. My email is just Austin, AUSTIN, at peak.us.
Excellent. We'll link all that up in the show notes. Austin, it's been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate you investing a little bit of time with me and the community today.
Thank you for having me, Mike. This has been very enjoyable.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And for the rest of you, we'll see you next time on Collective Conversation.